Today we're out here in Carmel Valley taking a look at the all-new 2017 Nissan Armada. This may look very similar to the last generation Nissan Armada, but it is very, very different underneath the skin. The last generation Armada was based on Nissan's Titan pickup truck. This is now related to the global Nissan Patrol SUV. As we've come to expect from Nissan, there's a strong family resemblance between this and all the other Nissan products sold in the US. We have this large chrome grille right up front with a slightly different look right here between the large chrome bars. We have standard LED low beam headlamps. The high beams are still halogens. And then we have this C-shaped daytime running lamp strip on either side. This particular model has front parking sensors and fog lamps. We also have this blacked out section right here on the lower bumper. That's for the radar adaptive cruise control sensor. At 208.9 inches long, this is a little over 2 inches longer than the 2015 Armada. This is also about 4 inches longer than a base Chevy Tahoe. Now remember that the Tahoe and the Expedition come in short and long versions, so this slots somewhere between the short and the long version of the Tahoe and the Expedition, but it is a little bit closer to the short body. Because this is now based on the Nissan Patrol that we see in other world markets, although the body has gotten longer, the wheelbase has actually shrunk slightly versus the last generation. Of course, the biggest thing you'll notice is how much more cohesive this design language is than the last generation Armada. We don't get those strange angles and strange curves that we had in the last version. We get this more consistent roof line and window line all the way to the back. Out back, we have tail lamps that mimic the C shapes that we saw in the headlamps up front. Large, very upright tailgate. This is a 3-row SUV, of course, but we do have a large practical cargo area behind the tailgate. We also have a bumper that sticks out a lot further than some of the other modern vehicles out there. Parking sensors well integrated there as well. Behind this particular cover, we do have a tow hitch receiver. Towing capacity is the main reason to buy a body-on-frame SUV over your average 3-row crossover. Towing capacity comes in at 8,500 pounds for every model of the Armada, rear-wheel drive or 4-wheel drive. That's a little bit different than the competition because most of the competition starts around 6,000 to 6,500 pounds, and then you have to option your way up into a towing capacity of around 8,000 pounds. The high towing capacity is thanks to a 5.6-liter V8 engine under the hood that's been thoroughly refreshed for this generation of the Armada. It is related to the last generation 5.6, but there are some large differences. This engine now features direct injection to improve both fuel economy and performance. We get 390 horsepower and 394 pound-feet of torque out of this, and it's now mated to a new 7-speed automatic transmission versus the old 5-speed that we saw in the last Armada. As you'd expect from a vehicle like this, rear-wheel drive is standard, all-wheel drive is available, and fuel economy numbers are definitely going to be lower than something like Nissan's Pathfinder. I'm going to give front seat comfort 8 out of 10 points. We are in the top-end model, so that means we do have a power tilt telescopic steering column and a 2-position seat memory for the driver. Unlike some of the luxury entries in this segment, we don't have a 4-way adjustable lumbar support. It is just 2-way. That's part of why we lose a few points versus the Chevy Tahoe. Moving to the second row, the score increases to 10 out of 10 points. This is the most comfortable second row that I have sat in this particular segment. Headroom back here is very generous. I still have about 3 inches of headroom, even though our model does have the optional moonroof. One thing worth noting is that like many other body-on-frame SUVs, these second row seats do not slide forward and backward to try and apportion space to that third row or take space away from the third row. Access to the third row is very easy. We simply pull this lever on the seat back for the second row. It flips and folds forward. Then we hop into, almost hop into the back of the Armada. Just quite a bit further back here than you might think. Leaning the seat back into position, you'll notice that I still have about an inch of legroom in the back. That's thanks to the overall size of the Armada. This is, again, a full-size 3-row SUV. We do have more interior room than you'd find in something like a Toyota Highlander. One of the big areas where this is different than the average 3-row crossover is the headroom in the back. Now my head does touch the ceiling if I lean all the way back in the seat, but I have considerably more room across this third row than you'll find in your average 3-row crossover. This is a 3-across bench seat, so we do have an actual seat belt right here in the middle as well. As with most 3-row vehicles, I suspect that the third row will spend most of its time folded. We do have a power folding mechanism that can be accessed from the rear or from this second row area right here. So you can just open the side door, reach back, fold the seats, or unfold the seats. Makes it a little bit easier. Many people assume that full-size SUVs must have large cargo compartments, but that's not necessarily true. If you want to carry 7 or 8 passengers and a ton of cargo, a minivan is probably going to be your best bet. Behind the third row seats, which are power folding in this particular model, we have 16.6 cubic feet of storage space. This is only about 0.6 of a cubic foot more than the Nissan Pathfinder crossover. This is a little bit more than the short wheelbase Tahoe and short wheelbase Yukon, but not as large as the Yukon XL or the Chevy Suburban, and this is about 2 cubic feet less than we find in the Ford Expedition. Under the cargo area load floor, we find a small amount of additional storage space. This is the top tether anchor location for the third row seats, and if we lift this up, you'll find the jack and the tire iron under here, because of course the spare tire is actually under the vehicle like a traditional SUV. Taking a quick look around the interior, we have height adjustable seat belts for the driver and the front passenger, and two-way adjustable headrests. The seats in this particular model are leather. They're also ventilated and heated, so you can see we have perforations in the center sections of the back and the seat bottom cushion. Because vehicles in this segment tend to straddle the prices that we normally associate with the mainstream segment and the luxury segment, parts quality is very high in this cabin. This reminds me an awful lot of the Infiniti QX80 in terms of overall quality. We have gathered leather right here on the door panels, soft touch armrest, although we do find some hard plastics lower on the door panel. We also see plenty of imitation wood trim that's fairly convincing, makes this very similar to the other models out there. The rest of the interior styling is very similar to other Nissan and Infiniti models. We have a lot of soft touch plastics going on, some stitching right here on the center console, soft touch portion over here in front of the passenger, and the upper portion of the dashboard is also a soft touch material. Going lower in that, we have a moderately sized glove compartment, which is fairly typical for big SUVs. We generally don't have enormous glove compartments, although I was able to fit a tablet computer inside. In the center of the dashboard, we have a center channel speaker with a little Bose logo right there. We find an infotainment system that's very similar to last generation Infiniti systems, as well as what we're seeing in some other Nissan models. This is not the same system that we see in vehicles like the Nissan Murano or the new Nissan Maxima. We have two large air vents on either side, and this system functions as both a touchscreen as well as a joystick-based system for navigation. Continuing down from there, we have the controls for the audio system, preset buttons, direct access buttons to various sources, track forward-backward, single slot optical disc player, volume knob, and a tune/folder knob. This allows you to navigate around certain media devices with that knob rather than the control knob above it. Further down from that, we find the controls for the 3-zone automatic climate control system. There is a rear zone as well as the front 2 zones. We also have the controls for our heated and ventilated seats, heated steering wheel, and a 12-volt power outlet. The shifter is a traditional console shifter design. Drive is all the way to the back. Manual mode is over to the left, up for up and down for down. To the right of that, we have large cup holders that are covered by this panel right here. And then we have this very interesting tiny cup holder as well. This is actually part of a removable divider that you can take out of the vehicle. And then we have another 12-volt power outlet right there. To the left of that, we find the control for the 4-wheel drive system. We're in auto mode right now that's suitable for most situations. We also have 4 high, and we can push down and rotate all the way over to 4 low, which locks the transfer case and gives us that lower ratio. We have a tow mode button right over here, stability and traction control button. Behind that, we have a slot for a cell phone and a USB input right there. You can take that out and close that cover if you prefer a slightly cleaner look. Continuing back from that, we have a softly padded center armrest. It opens to reveal a very large and deep storage well where we have some additional inputs. RCA jacks right over here. Our model does have the rear seat entertainment system, so that's why we have a video input. And we find the control for the built-in power inverter that's below this for the rear seat passengers. The instrument cluster is similar to what we see in other Nissan products. All the warning lights on the dashboard are on because we have the vehicle in the on position, but we don't actually have the engine started. So fear not about those warning lights. We have a tachometer on the left, the speedometer over there on the right. We have a few additional gauges that we don't find in our average crossover, like the battery voltage over on the left and the oil pressure right over here on the right below the fuel gauge. The multifunction display is very similar to what we see in other Nissan products. It gives us warning information. It also gives us a basic trip computer right here, range, fuel economy, outside temperature, access to certain vehicle settings, as well as the transmission mode display. The steering wheel design should be familiar if you've driven any of Nissan's truck products lately. We have sport grips right up top. It's a 4-spoke design. You'll find the controls for the infotainment system over here on the left side. We have source, track up, down, an enter button, back button. Those are also used to control that infotainment display in the center, volume up, down, voice command, and a phone hang up and pick up button. On the right side of the steering wheel, this is where you'll find the controls for the radar adaptive cruise control if your vehicle is so equipped. We have distance right over here, cruise control on, off, etc. And then this button right down here turns off and on the active portion of the vehicle's safety systems. As usually happens with first drives, I haven't been able to test the Armada on my usual roads, so these scores are going to be preliminary pending a full week with the new 2017 Armada. Acceleration is excellent in this vehicle. We ran from 0 to 60 in 6.3 seconds. 6.3 seconds is certainly faster than the base models of the Yukon or the Chevy Tahoe, but it's not quite as fast as the Yukon Denali because that does get General Motors' 6-liter V8 and 8-speed automatic transmission. This is faster than the base engine that we see in the Toyota as well as the Dodge. However, the Dodge Durango does have the optional V8 engine, and because it's lighter than this particular vehicle, it will go from 0 to 60 just a little bit faster. When it comes to braking, we stopped from 60 to 0 in 128 feet, which is fairly good for this segment as well. Once upon a time, large SUVs floated like a boat and handled just about as well as one. But this latest crop of large SUVs really has impressed me. The general suspension design of the Armada is obviously rugged, but it also reminds me an awful lot of your average large luxury car, and therefore this tends to handle and drive like a large luxury vehicle. Sure, the ride is definitely soft, but the handling is better than you might suspect. Obviously, if handling is your top priority, you should take a look at something like a Dodge Durango. It's significantly lighter than this. It's a little bit lower to the ground. It's definitely designed more for handling. It has a near perfect 50-50 weight balance, and it's easily the best handling option in this segment. However, in the body on frame segment, this is definitely towards the top. I do think that the GMC Denali handles just a hair better than the Armada. However, this definitely beats the Expedition in base form. The Tahoe and Yukon in base form definitely beats the Toyota Sequoia. Although handling and ride are generally two ends of the teeter-totter, this vehicle performs very well in both areas. This has an extremely smooth ride, although if you get the larger wheel and tire packages in this vehicle, then the ride does seem to decline just a little bit. Road noise and wind noise are very well controlled in this generation of the Armada. This is easily as quiet as the General Motors SUVs. Although we haven't been able to test this on our own home roads at 50 miles an hour out here, we did score at 69 decibels, which makes us among the quietest entries in this segment. One major area of improvement versus the last generation Armada is this 7-speed automatic transmission. Not only is first gear lower than the last generation Armada, giving us a faster 0 to 60 time, but the final gear is also higher than the last generation Armada, meaning that the engine is not spinning as fast when we're out here driving 60 miles an hour out on these winding roads. Fuel economy is difficult to talk about with any of these large SUVs. Obviously, you're going to get better fuel economy in something like a Nissan Pathfinder, likely significantly better fuel economy, to be perfectly honest. During our short time with this vehicle, we have been averaging between 14 and 15 miles per gallon in very mixed driving. I suspect that if you're more of a highway driver, you will get better fuel economy, and of course keep in mind that we have been 0 to 60 testing this vehicle, brake testing this vehicle, etc. Perhaps the biggest thing I noticed about the Armada out on the road is how much more luxurious this vehicle feels than the last generation Armada. This definitely feels more like a luxury vehicle than a mainstream vehicle. That's a little bit different than we see from the Toyota, the Chevy, or the Ford. Now, the Chevy does have a very nice interior, actually. It is one of the better interiors in a full-size SUV, but General Motors is keeping their best interiors for the Cadillac and the Denali trims. Those trims don't necessarily compete with this Armada. The Denali really competes more with the Infiniti QX80. It may seem odd to comment about that in the drive section of this review, but it's most obvious when you take a look at how soft and squishy these armrests are. It's very easy to lean your elbow on things, on the door panels, etc. We have more soft touch plastics than we find especially in that Toyota Sequoia. The overall driving experience is also just a little bit more premium than something like that Sequoia. As we see in other full-size SUVs, the Armada is very well equipped in all trim levels. The base SV trim does not get leather seats, but you can get that in the SL trim. However, all models come standard with navigation and the large touchscreen infotainment we've been seeing. Unlike some of the competition, the large V8 engine under the hood is also standard. If you step up to the SL trim, we get leather upholstery. We also have access to Nissan's latest safety systems like blind spot information, blind spot intervention, the forward collision warning system, as well as the lane keeping assistance. The top-end Platinum model makes just about everything standard, and then we have the option for the 7-passenger version, which puts this large fixed console in the middle of the second row. Personally, I suspect that the Armada sweet spot will be the SL trim with the optional safety package that gives us the radar adaptive cruise control, the blind spot system, lane departure warning system, etc. Nissan has only released a small amount of information on the pricing for the 2017 Armada. They're telling us that the SV trim will start at $44,400. That's about $6,000 more than the 2015 model, but it is still about $3,000 less than the base price on the Chevy or the Ford. It's pretty difficult to speculate on the Platinum package, but you can bet that the Platinum is still going to be less expensive than something like a GMC Yukon Denali. This vehicle seems to slot somewhere between the mainstream entries and the Denali in terms of overall luxury content, because the Infiniti QX80 is really the more direct competitor to the Denali, and of course the Cadillac Escalade. The Cadillac Escalade is significantly more expensive than what we've been taking a look at. Comparisons are tricky, but this does undercut every entry in this segment with the exception of the Dodge Durango by a decent margin. The Dodge Durango isn't really the same sort of thing, however. Every other entry in this segment is a traditional body-on-frame SUV like we're taking a look at right here. The Dodge Durango is a large unibody three-row crossover closely related to the Mercedes-Benz ML and, of course, the Jeep Grand Cherokee. You can actually think of it sort of as the three-row Grand Cherokee. Maximum towing capacity really is the big difference between the body-on-frame entries and something like the Durango. The Durango starts at 6,200 pounds towing capacity with the V6 engine. If you move on up to the V8, you can get up to 7,400 pounds. This beats that by over 1,000 pounds. Again, comparisons are difficult because Nissan hasn't released complete pricing on the Armada yet, but you can expect this to be several $1,000s less than the General Motors SUVs. It's going to be about $20,000 less than the closely related Infiniti QX80. If you're looking for a full-size SUV that has a decent amount of cargo room in the back, has the ability to tow over 8,000 pounds, then you should definitely put the Armada on your shopping list. This particular segment hasn't seen a lot of attention from most of the manufacturers. The Ford Expedition hasn't really been refreshed inside and out. We did get new engines under the hood, but not a whole lot else changed. Of course, the Chevy and the GMC SUVs are probably some of the newer entries in the segment, but that's not necessarily saying much. Up to this point, the Sequoia and the Armada were the oldest entries in the segment, but now the Nissan is one of the newest. It also has a 7-speed automatic transmission, which is 1 gear more than the average entry in this segment. Be sure and check back with us when we can get our hands on one for a complete week, but up until then, expect the Armada to be one of the best values in this segment. I'll see you next week.